I think I had taken the narrative on a little bit too much that like media was basically dying. And actually this repeats within the technology sector as well. Like, why would you build technology for media?
Such a condescending way of looking at it, no? It's like tech say things like that because they think that they can index everything themselves and they can create, like we saw what happened when Perplexity launched their topical pages, right? And you already can ask ChatGPT to send you a news summary of the day every morning and whatever. But come on, if we, media, don't produce that content, you don't have anything to offer people, right? Let's be realistic here. We are producing something that LLMs cannot produce. We're producing something of value. We need to be very confident in what we're producing when we talk about this. And thankfully, there are already players in Silicon Valley who actually want to build things with a much fairer monetary compensation for scraping or for quoting or for things like that, because that's the future.
Welcome back to Navigating Noise. It's a real pleasure today to speak with Dmitry Shishkin. He's one of these very well-known media managers out there, and he runs the basically non-Swiss media portfolio for a very prestigious Swiss media company, Ringier. And so what I wanted to, like, when I was thinking about a lot of things around the media space, we were kind of thinking about, like, we wanted to have someone on to talk through this. And one of the things that I was hesitant to do was to go after someone who was just like narrowly like the AI guy in media, as opposed to someone who's thought around like how to manage and what to do about the future of news, and then thinking about AI as a piece of that. And so what I was really excited about talking to Dmitry about was how this fits in to where media is going. As a company at Filter Labs, we have done a lot with journalists. We still do a lot with journalists. We're kind of always like very interested in how they're using things. But today, I'm really looking forward to talking to Dmitry more about the perspective from how to manage this within the media company and what he sees as the good uses of it and what are like the ways in which AI is actually really distracting right now to journalists. So welcome, Dmitry. It's really a pleasure to have you with us today. Would you tell our listeners a little bit about your background and how you got into this big prestigious role that you are now?
Thank you, Jonathan, and thank you for inviting me to the podcast. I'm Dmitry. I have lived more than half of my life in London, from where I moved to Zurich fairly recently, just under a year ago. But if I talk about my career is kind of can be divided in roughly 4 parts, uneven parts. I spend a lot of time at the BBC, where I started as a radio producer/presenter, and then there was an opportunity of actually going to this new thing called digital in 2000, and I continued doing that for until 2018, and then I moved to a fairly very well-known startup at that time. Especially for those of you who love travel, you would remember a company called Culture Trip. I was chief content officer there, and I was doing a lot of work on the intersection of content, product, and data, and which is my passion. Basically, it's not about content itself. I'm not a journalist per se. I used to be, but not anymore. And but I love helping journalists be effective in their new surroundings. And then after Culture Trip, Corona hit, and there was not a lot of interest in travel or need for travel, and I became a consultant for about a few years. And afterwards, Ringier was one of my clients, and they asked me to join, and I joined, and I'm now running their non-Swiss media portfolio, which is a diverse collection of news websites and print in Central and Eastern Europe.
Yeah, well, thanks for that. It's helpful, I think, for some of our listeners to kind of get the full range of because of your background here. I guess just like someplace where I was kind of really wanting to start, and it's a question that I feel like I should know the answer to on it, but I sometimes feel like I don't really have the right answer. But like, how are newsrooms leveraging the latest iteration of AI products? Like what's the actual state of play right now?
I think it's quite an optimistic place right now. Although I would be probably, because I'm on the optimist side of the fence, I think I would describe that as optimistic. But I just returned from a One IFRA Congress, which is one of the kind of umbrella organizations for media, and it's an annual congress. And I left with a very optimistic view on, a very encouraged view on everything that's happening. Not necessarily about AI, but about genuinely the state of media, because our sector has been kind of downtrodden for many, many years, one way or another. And then suddenly, right now, thinking, yes, it is hard, but only hard things are worth doing in life, I think. And we are trying very, very hard to leverage AI in any way or form. I'll give you an example. Like in my area of media, we are now asking journalists, of course, to use AI tools as a matter of course. So everything that they do can potentially be improved and touched by AI. But by latest numbers, we have between 50 and 60% of our content that we publish out there has been touched in one way or another by AI. And that could be
What does
different.
what does that mean to be touched by AI? Is it auto generation of some of the text? Is it trying to find just like basically the querying a question and answer process that maybe a journalist would use AI as a research tool? Could you help us understand like what it means for some of the content to be touched by AI?
Can mean a lot of things. So our content management system currently has about 10 inbuilt tools that we already have inside CMS, and they can be used for everything. And I'm feel a little bit. On the one hand, it's really nice that we're using it. On the one hand, it's such a bread and butter things for everybody right now that I feel a little bit ashamed of even talking about it. Things like automated headlines generation or SEO tags suggestions, or like everybody has been using the Grammarly or other spell checking tools and all of those types of things. But things like, for example, paste a URL here, press a button, and it will create content depending on your own guidelines and your own style and tone and everything else. So those types of things, or create an article which will be then automatically filled by pictures or images based on what you have written about from the corresponding data banks and everything else. So like a lot of those types of things, which actually is great that we have done them so quickly and so far, because I always felt that last year was all about the year of actually getting those under the hood things right. And everybody was talking about them all the time. That for me was 2024 was all about that. And we are kind of doing, everybody, you go to all the conferences and everything else, and kind of you see the same type of things happening everywhere, like transcription of text, turning text into voice, those types of things, or, turning a bunch of photos into a video. So not necessarily groundbreaking, not necessarily, but that bread and butter, that baseline without which you will not be able to do cooler things. The cooler things are going to be happening right now in 2025. This is about cooler things, and 2026 will be about even cooler things yet. But 2025 will be about, chatbots, where a lot of media organizations are introducing their own bots on their own websites where audience can interact with. And then the question is, do you only guardrail the bot to only interact with the content you have in the archive, or do you use it as just regular ChatGPT embedded in your website, for example? If you do that, both present opportunities and risks. And then we obviously are going to go into kind of agentic AI, and 2026 will be all about that. And we are going to be seeing how our sector will be changing so dramatically. So even the digital transformation or social media revolution or mobile revolution will go into the background in comparison to what we're going to experience.
Yeah, I mean that's fascinating. That's actually like more aggressive than I thought you were going to
Yeah,
say.
but you know why? Because we slept through two previous ones, and I think
Okay.
we in media are, if not obsessed, or what is the right word, we are very cognizant of the fact that we need to be on our toes and we need to really go for it, because otherwise, when the things happen to us, and the narrative inside sector for many years was exactly like that. Oh, well, my God, we're so important, but we're so poor, and everybody was kind of always cutting corners around us and everything. And it won't work this time. And we just need to be much better in everything, in managing our own stuff, and managing our own priorities, in building our own things, or buying our own things or from somebody else, talking to AI companies and all of that. So all of this is actually incredibly exciting. Super hard, but very exciting.
Yeah. I mean, what? I mean, I assume you're speaking from the vantage point of someone who like manages a set of media organizations. Is the same view shared by the actual journalists in the newsroom? You feel as though, or it feels like you're working sometimes against the grain a little bit with them.
Uh, it wasn't my experience, actually, and it has not been my experience. You know why? Because I have been a journalist myself for many years, and I actually built my career making a big deal out of it. So when I became media manager, kind of slowly, even at the BBC, when I still had maybe like 5 last jobs after I stopped being a journalist but became a media manager. But I was introducing things that other people were trusting my judgment to actually go and do it, because otherwise they knew that I was still journalist first and foremost. And I don't want to slag off any other disciplines that are really helpful when people like product managers, data scientists, or data engineer, all of those things, they are super helpful, super relevant to us. But if we don't get the editorial proposition right, whatever that editorial proposition is in the age of AI, it doesn't really matter how you're going to wrap things or how you're going to present it or what kind of distribution strategy is going to be. If you are trying to flog suboptimal product that nobody needs, the answer is only one.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting point. I mean, I think something that you were saying when we were chatting just before this was that like there's been a lot of like worry about like the business model of it. And I mean, do you think that there's like that the real problem has been around like actually news organizations creating the right content for people and such, like and then like what are the prospects of content improvement from media?
I think I'm a little bit on a radical side here, because I actually think that content and what it does to people and the importance of us in people's lives is the most important thing. Because nobody is questioning why they need Spotify, why they need Netflix, and everybody is willing to pay for it. And even in the American market, currently, there are more people subscribing to LLMs already, or AI companies already, than to media. In 3 years' time, since ChatGPT was presented to us. So we need to ask ourselves a question: why we exist in the market and what role we play in people's lives. If people say there is nothing going to be missing in my life if you, media A, were to disappear tomorrow, then we're all stuffed, right? We don't have a future.
So, I mean, is this the vision of media as entertainment?
It's not about even entertainment. The point I made about Spotify and Netflix is, of course, about entertainment, but it's also about it's all about helpfulness. It's about playing a role that is really important to people's lives. Like, there is a reason why people tend to be now consuming news from influencers, but not from established brands. That's a really big problem for us. Another problem is that if AI overviews are going to kill all the search traffic one way or another, and we already see that in a really big way, kind of the traffic going down, and poor people who have been relying on that traffic for a long time. But we also remember what happened to all these media darlings from several years ago when social media kind of closed the vent, So I think ultimately it's about original content. It's about very strong brand. It's about trustworthiness, and it's about something saying, you know what, I actually will go to this media A or B or C because I know that only there I will get something that will actually explain the world to me. Currently, media are just not good at that, and I don't know what the answer is. I literally don't think that we will be able to immediately kind of change the way we are perceived. No, because and that's another problem. A lot of people are saying, well, there is a problem of news avoidance, and there is a problem for a reason there. But you know what? I have been calling myself an active news avoider for a long time, because I only was very selective on what I was consuming, and I was not prepared to just lean back and just consume news in the way media was giving it to me, But I'm not news avoider at all when it comes to my own proactive selection of sources, mediums, formats, all of that. So the question is, we need to continue doing what we do always best, because AI can deliver you content until the cows come home, but AI will never be able to read between the lines, and journalists can, and that's our unique selling point. That's going to be that.
Yeah, and you can imagine, or you've seen this like work in such a way that the journalist can bring that indispensable human element still while being powered by these tools. Can you give us like an example of like a story or some like use case where like it really clearly did come about with a more like powerful product that was both like successful from the vantage point of the media organization, but also like really informative for people who were consuming it?
I wish I was able to give you something so eye-opening that everybody will say, now I understand how AI will help people in consuming news. It will be a little bit probably too optimistic from me in that respect, or kind of I would assume a lot. The issue is that whilst we talked about all under the hood stuff that happened for media, and media has been really good at actually kind of jumping and doing all of those things, and that's a good thing that everybody was roughly doing the same thing, because everybody roughly saw the problems or that AI can help. Yeah. Second thing, multimodality in AI is yet to hit media properly. Everybody keeps talking about the famous Time magazine example of when Trump was made the person of the year. Suddenly they were saying, well, you can read, you can interact with the article, you can ask its question, you can listen to the article, you can read a long version, a short version. I asked the question whether this has been productized to a degree where every single article is like that. And there was no answer. And you know why there is no answer? Probably because it was done for this particular thing to show what the possibility is. But has it been applied to like 300 articles you output every day? Probably not. So the question is, multimodality will be the next big stage for sure, because once everybody has been really obsessed with personalization, which not a lot of media organizations get right anyway, but multimodality will contribute to that in a big way, because suddenly people will be getting the same type of information, but in different formats, or maybe in different times of the day, or maybe using different distribution methods or something like that. So that I'm excited about a lot, because then you can also like plug in the archive and say, okay, in order for me to turn this update me article, and this is where we're going to my favorite subject of user needs. Update me articles generally are ignored by majority of people because they are just kind of tons a dozen, or whatever the expression is. But once you turn this article into an educate me article or give me perspective article on the same subject, suddenly you can say, actually, I wrote a really great archive piece on that maybe 2 months ago, and we can actually ask AI to turn it into a different form of the update me article and immediately serve it today, although it was published two months ago. So I'm really excited about that, because then, so that's one thing. Although what we are seeing in a positive light, what we're seeing is how we said that holy triangle of topics, formats, and user needs. That is the most important thing for every article to have. Like you once you start tracking long numbers or big amount of content that you output via a lens of topics, which we already do, lens of user needs, which a lot of companies start doing, and then also by the lens of formats, then you already make yourself much more diversified from the point of view of the offer that you're giving. But once you start plugging in third parties information about what information you generate with this content, and then start connecting all of those third-party data lakes together, imagine, and this is my kind of really big idea that I want to do next year, or maybe even this year. Imagine you have a corpus of articles that, say, 1,000 articles. You have 6 third-party tools that interact with those articles all the time. One tool is for editorial analytics. One tool is for subscriptions. One tool is for push notifications, for email marketing, whatever. The issue currently is that every single person, every single data is only about one thing. But once you start asking agents to combine that data, and they only have one common denominator, is the URL that you want to understand and make it work better, then AI will just help us so much.
I mean, this is fascinating, and there's a certain part of me that's like really captivated by this, and part of it is the like, so at Filter Labs we work with a lot of journalists, and perhaps the most rewarding part of my job is being in like signal contact with the actual journalists there and like asking them things about the story, about other things. Sometimes they'll tell me their opinions on things, which has been like really fascinating at times. Other times they will, just give me more information on it. That, and I can imagine like a way in which like users get to have some kind of simulation around that, and like that's all very captivating, I guess. But in the back of my mind still, and maybe this is just like something in the discourse in America about media right now, on it, is that like the public interest aspect of it, that like, and there's certainly a good bit of mythology in this, at least in America, about like how the fourth estate is somehow like intrinsically important to democracy. The history of America is such that we've survived some pretty over some periods we're having a pretty terrible media.
And also, if you think about journalism back at those times, the journalist was extremely opinionated, extremely opinionated. So, question is, we still were able to actually distill the morals or ethics out of something that was based on very biased views.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, so I'm kind of wondering whether like why you're not talking about like the democratic ends of journalism there. Is it something that you think like somehow that conversation is inadequately framed in some way, or something that you don't feel like really in your role you actually consider so much or can consider? I'm just kind of puzzled by that a little bit, and I'd like to hear more.
You remind me of the conversation I had this morning about inclusivity at work and all of those types of things. But inclusivity at work actually can mean so many different things. It's not only about, say, neurodivergent people. It could be about absolutely anything if you really think about inclusivity. But I mean, we have an issue with gender bias in media for sure, and we have had it for a while. And we at Ringier have even developed a tool in our content management system that analyzes the content for gender bias. What kind of questions we ask our characters, or whatever, and or even is our front page balanced from the point of view of gender balance or something like that. So, but I also remember when I was still at the BBC, we had an issue with one of the Indian teams, BBC Indian teams, where the output was so skewed male that we needed to do something, and we kind of decided to solve it in a very crude manner. We started asking correspondents only to bring stories with women protagonists at the end. So you kind of go to the market and please don't interview a man, but interview a woman, for example, or go to somewhere else. It doesn't matter. Question here is that, can AI help us with immediately, even before publication? You say you're publishing a piece, and it tells you, it tells a commissioning editor, this piece can be published, but within 3 hours you need to commission something that will represent a completely opposite point of view. Or maybe in the future we need to start publishing things which will have like several points of view of it in the same article. I mean, we already have Give Me Perspective user need for that anyway, but sometimes it's really important to say, this is a problem, and then you got to see two opposing points of view in the same article. I think it's really important to basically say, this is what you're about to read right now, and this is that's why headlines matter. That's why the user needs idea was so important, because you're sending a message to people, because they scan all the headlines and all the headlines are the same. If you are writing a headline which is actually representing a different user need, your eye stumbles upon scrolling and thinks, actually, I didn't see that angle before, and I might read it. So from the political perspective, we, of course, I mean, the world is very, very diverse, and I remember still when I was a consultant, the conversations we used to have with our when my American clients would be very different to my Asian clients or my European clients. So agenda aside, agenda will be very different from country to country, and it still is. And also some countries or some regions, kind of their development is slightly different to the others. So kind of it's okay, those conversations definitely we'll see, because if you go to some of the Eastern European countries like Slovakia, Hungary, Romania, Serbia, they're already quite polarized, and whether we are already kind of in the situation we have currently in the States, remains to be seen, but it's still there.
Changing gears a little bit here, I'm kind of wondering, you've kind of talked about like where it's going and basically like AI slipping into this like trajectory where media, it's going anyway, which makes sense. I mean, that's how things work. Like AI adds to an industry. But if you were to like create something from the ground up here, um, what would it be, if you were to like just like say like you didn't have to start with a lot of the existing team or like infrastructure that you had, and like would there be a really important and central role for AI, or would it essentially be the prospects that you're laying out here? I think about this because like the analogy that I have in mind, because like we've interacted with quite a number of people either in like the hedge fund space or the like VC space, who are basically trying to create like a fully automated like AI version of themselves. Whether it's like Mark Andreessen's vision of having like a fully AI like basically VC model, or there's some people in the hedge fund space who want to like have it as well. I mean, is there a similar vision for media that is there, or is it going to be more human centric?
When social media appeared, nobody really understood how powerful it will be and what kind of effect it will have on society, negative and positive at the same time. We probably are still at the situation where we don't really know. We know for sure that we as media, we all have ethical guidelines. We all have responsible AI principles that we want to stick to. We all know that people will not lose the job to AI, but they will lose jobs to people who know how to use AI, all of those things. Agents are a really interesting area because you don't really yet know what agents will mean, both for newsrooms, kind of easier to think, but we don't yet know what agents will do for people and what kind of things people will be asking agents to do. And also, it also reminds me when, many years ago, when you started only thinking about news and internet and digital sector, I think I heard somewhere that news were only 4% of internet. And you kind of always need to remember that, because we in the sector, we think that we are very, very important to people, and we might have been maybe when we were in print or even in television, but suddenly when you are all online, there are other more positive and really, really cool things to do out there. And I think it's really important to be updated, because you are a responsible citizen. It's really important, unattainable part of democracy, that you really need to have informed citizenship. But the issue here is that we need to prove our worth to people. Otherwise, irrespective of what we're going to build, we are going to just be witnessing closures and more closures. But whether it will be a winner-take-it-all situation like we currently see in the States with New York Times, and of course they probably will not agree with that fully, but we see, frankly, that if you have New York Times subscription and one local subscription, you kind of are okay, but then where does it leave everybody else there? But we also see some really thriving markets like Germany, for example, where you actually see lots and lots and lots of players finding their subscription models working and finding. But the issue here is that if people will be asking their agents to curate news for them and everything else, then what really becomes important, and we are obsessively working towards that, is AI visibility. It's really important thing for us. So, and because of that, I'm completely in the camp of allowing AI to scrape your content, because you actually need to teach them to know who we are. And
so what do you mean by AI visibility there?
When people are going to ask what the news are, and you are in Romania, how do I make sure that my main title is referenced and seen by LLMs that scrape?
Oh, I see. So you want like your content needs to be like basically available to
exactly. In the same way how we did SEO in the past, now we do AIO, because we want to make sure that people know who we are, and because of that they are scraping us, and because of that we do a lot of work by saying, we can't afford to be everything for everyone anymore. We need to own the areas of the topics of interest. If we don't own the topics of interest, they will be owned by somebody else, and then we lose all our business. However, having said that, I also say that we are not going to be in the business of kind of measuring referrals from LLMs to us. Those days are over. I don't think that it's a right approach. The right approach is always going to be get the users to us, become so, or present our content to where the users are, and find another way of monetizing it or somehow capturing the value there as well. And there are, like, I don't know, 15, 16 different ways of monetizing media these days. So, if you are focused, and this is what I really loved about being in Krakow a few weeks ago with the INMA One Infra Congress, because that feeling that we can do it. If we are focused enough, if we really, really think about this is the way to go, I think that we can really move things.
Yeah, I mean, the One Infra conference was like an eye opener to me that I attended last year, where we met in Copenhagen, and that I think I had taken the narrative on a little bit too much, that like media was basically dying, and actually this repeats within the technology sector as well. Like, why would you build technology for media? Sort of thing. And it's like there are some funds that like focus on it.
Such a condescending way of looking at it. No,
Yeah.
It's like tech say things like that because they think that they can index everything themselves, and they can create like we saw what happened when Perplexity launched their topical pages, right? And you already can ask ChatGPT to send you news summary of the day every morning and whatever. But come on, if we media don't produce that content, you don't have anything to offer people, right? And yeah, so I'm kind of let's be realistic here. We are producing something that LLMs cannot produce. We're producing something of value. We need to be very confident in what we're producing when we talk about this. And thankfully, there are already players in Silicon Valley who actually want to build things with a much fairer monetary compensation for scraping or for quoting or for things like that, because that's the future. The future is where we work together as a team, because humanity can only win. I'll give you just two examples. I read a book by a famous futurist, Amy Webb, a few years ago about the future of artificial intelligence. And she created this several scenarios. One of them was, of course, a negative one. One of was kind of realistic one. And we are going down towards negative one, where everybody is for themselves doing their own thing. And I'm now reading a book about the future of space exploration. And again, there is a question of we either do things together to fly somewhere nice in the future, or we actually are just so obsessed with just earning our own money from our own factory on the moon that we don't really want to cooperate. And I think this is for us as Homo sapiens, it's a very, very sad state of affairs.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of like weird antagonism, and some of that has to do, no doubt, with like the political cultures of like Silicon Valley, which still has a pretty significant impact in the whole tech sector there, as even though it's been like more distributed globally and even across the US, it's no longer what it was in like this single hub of importance there. But it strikes me that like you're kind of indicating, I'd like you to say more about this, like what do you think the successful relationship is between news organizations and these LLMs? Obviously there's that New York Times suit that's out there, which suggests that there's some sub-ideal relationship that exists right now. And do you I guess, what's the ideal scenario, and is it realistic?
Well, the ideal scenario is that we need to be compensated for copyright. We need to understand how all the LLMs were trained. We know that they will need media because the LLMs will be hungry for up-to-date information, and up-to-date information comes from media. So we just need to have a grown-up conversation about the value that we have, and I think it's an honest, intellectually, it's a hard topic to figure out how to do it, but ultimately it's about fairness. Fairness, because we in media, majority of media, we represent the shortest connection to people's trust, to audiences' trust. Because if you know what, if something big happens, there was a conversation between TV and digital. If something big happens, people used to, watch TV and say, "Oh my God, something is happening live." Then suddenly it's no longer true because people just go on the website and check the same thing there. But I think we as media, we have shown ourselves as an extremely resilient sector. We have gone through print to the advent of radio, then suddenly TV happened, then suddenly digital happened, then suddenly mobile happened, then now AI is happening. I'm pretty sure that we will figure it out, and that's why I'm so confident, because our sector is intellectual by default. Sometimes it's intellectual probably to its own detriment, maybe because we don't like to talk too much about things, but talking is important, and understanding the impact on society is important. And I think that it's really important for us to hold any power to account, whoever that power is.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, this is a very similar conversation. In addition to my role at Filter Labs and kind of being a founder there, a faculty member at probably the least popular university, at least from the current administration's perspective at Harvard, and thinking about the university is going through a tremendous period of stress, particularly Harvard at this period. But if you think about the institution of the university has weathered quite a lot since its 12th century founding. And it's been able to navigate this in ways which you might look back and see some periods were less successful or less ideal than other periods from a certain vantage point today. But it was still there. It's a very resilient institution. And it strikes me there's an analogy here with media or with journalism, perhaps, in that I think that's a really healthy one to bring, to say hey, we've been around and there's been a lot of iterations of what we've looked like. And sometimes we might judge poorly some. And so I think that's really welcome in a way, but I guess I kind of wonder why that journalists themselves don't exude that confidence on it. Where's the blockage for them to have that confidence in their institution?
Well, a lot of journalists are very cynical by default, and maybe this is where it doesn't help. Because actually, if your glasses always have empty, then you kind of see all the problems in the world, kind of pile on, and it's not helpful here. I'll make a couple of points of what you said about academia and media. Of course, they are super, super close, and there are even publications right now to The Conversation, for example, really cool media publication to really blow up all the really interesting work that is done in academia. But you also can say that actually academia probably is even more conservative in that respect, or open to change in comparison to media. That's also maybe a fair point to say. So let's not generalize here, because I think it's the last thing we want is that we don't want you always will have pockets of innovation, pockets of kind of a little bit kind of backpedaling and things like that. But overall, I think it's always about intellectual rigor and understanding of a role we as media and academia play in Homo sapiens development altogether. And I think it's really important to get everything that is happening with AI is amazing, actually. Well, not everything, but a lot of things are amazing because they help people so far. Imagine having your own coder who is always in your pocket, and you can do whatever you want with it. Or imagine having somebody who is who is in your pocket, who will do things for you. Again, going back to agents and going back to trust and how we're going to start. I mean, I already read somewhere that Visa card is about to launch, or already launched, a card that has been kind of prepared specifically for agents' use or something like that. So incredible. All of those things, absolutely incredible. And so we need to embrace it. We need to be obsessively open to anything that is happening. Like for example, for me, the next big thing will be do a deep research thing, because I've never done one before. So I need to understand how it works and what it will do to me, as what it potentially can it mean to media organization. Or maybe this is where media organizations and academia actually can join forces. But I was doing a thing for Ringier over the last year or so. We created a bunch of short, practical, actionable things that we call digital media playbook, to basically showcase the best practice of all digital aspects of working. So just to get our portfolio on the same page in terms of what good looks like. And amount of AI I used to help me with that was really, really cool. And to an extent where I was transcribing interviews, I was compiling all the interviews together, I was getting rid of things that were not original from all of the interviews, I was visualizing my thoughts using some other technology. I even was one of the transcriber tool invited themselves to a board meeting because I forgot to tick off the button of them joining, and that was not really well received by board members who actually saw like an AI agent or software join. So the point I'm making is that if you're not embracing it in any aspects of your life, home, home or work, then you will be missing out, because you need to be, and this is where it means really that you need to be super practical about this. It's not enough to just read reports or something. It's not enough to, you need to try those things with your own hands and then understand how it actually, like how can be applied to your work.
Yeah, I mean, there's part of me that like is like, yeah, I mean, I started a technology company. I'm like, yes, adopt technology there. But there's a part of me that, and this is kind of from some of the research stuff I've done at the Human Flourishing Program on the impact of technology, is that like, yes, adopt if the technology is a tool for you. Does it actually serve your ends? And I think there is and this is kind of weird that the technologist here is like saying, well, we need to be careful about adoption of technology, in that like some of it is now purporting to be more than just a tool to you. It's something more of like replacement, and like we should embrace that, or we should be scared of that. And I guess like from vantage point of both like building it and trying to understand it, like I want technology to continue to be a tool there. And when it isn't, I do worry that like we become the technology's tool on it. And there are examples of that. There's some of it's a little sci-fi, of course. But like, do you think journalism is in the is approaching a danger zone where it gets overwhelmed, where actually like journalists doing that work that you said, reading between the lines, understanding something and being able to build like actual trusting relationships with readers, users, however we want to understand them, is in danger by the technology?
It's our job as media leaders to understand what the right setup is, what the right setup of what is a proportion of original content you create and maybe curated content from everybody else, or what is the role of audience engagement, i.e. people who actually make your content travel faster and travel farther and everything else, against the actual content creators, for example. Or maybe our media needs to become like a place for a bunch of influencers that have access to all the traditional media things, under the hood things that we have, like legal support and CMS and all of the AI tools that have already been infosect and legal and everything else. So, I mean, there are so many options here, but you just need to always remember that since the dawn of humanity, people were telling stories all the time. And people want to tell stories and hear stories by people, from people. And even now, like I think, like for example, you create a digital twin, so your famous editor-in-chief can be in 20 places at the same time, creating 20 video bulletins in a second or something like that. It's okay, but would you substitute that digital twin of that person to just a random AI avatar? I don't know. Maybe in some cases, but again, it all boils down to trust. If your editor-in-chief writes a opinion piece saying, you know what, from tomorrow you will see me in many more instances on the website because they have created something that, or we have created together a digital copy of me, and I'm now going to be I'm going to be delivering, I don't know, you have 1 million unique users every week or every day. I'm going to be delivering 1 million versions of myself, explaining news to people in 1 million ways. So, of course, like guardrails and things that you are going to are okay for you or not okay for you have always been with us for a long, long time. I'm pretty sure that, even when, BBC was founded to, broadcast radio programs, it was already there. And, one of the very famous things was about when War Over the Worlds novel was read live on the BBC, and people were really thinking that it was happening at the same time. So is this misinformation? Is this fake news? Or when BBC on the 1st of April on TV was showing that spaghetti actually are growing on trees in Italy, and people are just kind of harvesting it like that. So again, in the age of AI, when everybody saw Pope in this kind of puffer jacket and everything else, it is fake news. Yes, it is. But you also kind of need to treat yourself a little bit less seriously and think, well, sometimes there is space for fun as well.
Yeah, well, it strikes me that you can do that when you have confidence in your institution and what you're offering. And I've often thought that those places that are most afraid of technology, and there's pockets of the institutions, whether it's in the university, in media, wherever, are actually those who have some form of crisis of confidence in actually what they do. And so it's like when we talk to fellow faculty members, like those who are most afraid of it are actually those who have had some crisis around like the confidence in the institution of the university, or like the practice of educating.
It's very practical. It's very real. It's very real. I was at the BBC when we did a very famous now slide where 80% of content only generates 20% of engagement. So literally what we're saying is 80% of content are going straight to wastebasket. Literally. And it's super hard for people to accept. It's super hard for people to basically say, I'm doing something that nobody needs, but I'm doing something because I have been doing it for, I think there was a joke, or maybe it's only half of the joke, about Russia decided to switch off its international broadcasting many years ago without telling several teams who continued going to TV, to radio stations, and outputting for many years without the signal was no good. Again, maybe a joke, maybe only half of a joke, who knows? But the issue here is that nobody is questioning why they need Netflix or Spotify. And that's why people are getting it wrong, saying, we will do Spotify for news. Like, if I hear about another idea of Spotify for news, my God, guys, like, it's not about that anymore. It's about having a one-to-one relationship with people in a way that makes sense to people, for people to say, you know what, I cannot live without it. I just cannot. My life will be worse. And maybe we just need to go back to basics and explain our role to people and what role we play in people's lives, or should play at least.
Well, that's a great place to end on this. And thank you very much, Dmitry, for your time. This has been a really fascinating conversation and meandered a bit for it. But I really think that our listeners will really be excited about this. And just a question that we ask at the end: how can people, if they want to hear more about what you're talking about, is there a way that they can follow you or kind of hear more of your musings on AI and the industry and where it's all going?
The best thing is to connect on LinkedIn, because this is kind of the only platform that I keep going for professional things. Used to be very crazy about Twitter, but can't really force myself to get into Threads or Blue Sky or anything like that. It's just really hard to get myself from one to another, and frankly, don't have time anymore. But LinkedIn.
Yeah, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.